All right. So Jibreel has appeared before the Prophet Muhammad and instructed him to read. And the Prophet Muhammad is saying, I can't read, and he's getting hugged very tightly. And this happens 3 times. And last week we established this was done. Jibreel did that to the Prophet, for the Prophet to realize that he wasn't dreaming. And this was actually something physical happening to him. And so that later on, he wouldn't have any doubts in his mind as to what happened. In case he might think that he was imagining the whole thing or dreaming, he actually felt this very tight, this strong hugging. And then after this happened 3 times, Jibreel recited the first few verses of Surah Iqra and then left him. He disappeared. Until now, the Prophet still doesn't know who this mysterious person was. But he was shaken by the whole experience. So he leaves the cave and returns to his wife, and he's very shaken. And he tells his wife, I'm afraid that maybe he's done something wrong. Maybe Allah is shaming him for doing something wrong. And Khadija, being the loyal wife that she is, the model wife, she tells him, no, that's impossible. You are a wonderful human being. You feed the poor, you help the needy. There's nothing wrong that you do. And she wasn't even afraid for him. She knew, she was 100% certain that the Prophet did not experience anything bad. But even she didn't have the answers. So she took the Prophet and they went to see her wife, her cousin, Warqa ibn Nawfal. Cousin Warqa ibn Nawfal was actually a Christian convert. I said last time he was a Hanif, but he wasn't. He was a Christian, but he was well versed in the old books of the Christians and the Jews. So he read them, read the books, he studied them very carefully. So Waraqah immediately, as soon as he heard the story, he recognized what had happened to the Prophet and told them who that mysterious man was. And I'll just get a copy of that dialogue. So Waraqah says, هذا الناموس الذي أنزله الله عز وجل على موسى. So he said that person, that mysterious man was the Namus, was Jibreel, who came down to Musa. And he said he wished he was young enough, strong enough to be able to survive later, and because he was an old man. Waraq ibn Nawfal was already probably in his 80s, feeble, weak old man, but he was very wise, very knowledgeable, very intelligent. So he said, yes. So the Prophet tells Sayyidina Muhammad, that your people will try to expel you from your hometown. So the Prophet was shocked. He said, will they try to expel me? He doesn't understand why. What's going on? He hasn't done anything wrong to anybody. Why would he be expelled? And so Waraqah says this every time this happens, whenever somebody receives a revelation, there's always conflict between that person and the community they live with, and they get expelled from living amongst their community. And he wished he was young enough so that he would, inshallah. That's right. He wished he was young enough so that he would be able to support the Prophet later in life. But it wasn't meant to be, and that he would pass away within a few days after this meeting. Now this is a very short encounter, but very important. Why? Because it reveals, the Prophet found out who that mysterious man was. He found that it was Jibreel. This is why it was meant to be. It's a very important detail that we just skip over. We'll read about it, we won't think about it. He was still unsure as to what happened. But But Waraq ibn Nawfal told him this was Jibreel. He came down and this is a revelation. So the Prophet now knows who the Jibreel was, and he's waiting for Jibreel to come back to him and speak to him. But what happened was there was a delay. Jibreel did not come back to him, and scholars are unsure whether this was for a period of 3 to 40 days. And during this, the period that Jibreel was away, the Prophet was became very anxious. He started to doubt himself still. He wanted to see Jibreel again, and at least to get some confirmation, to get more information from him, confirmation that he was a prophet. And finally, Jibreel appears to him while the Prophet was walking, and he looked up in the sky and saw Jibreel, is appearing very big, sitting on a throne. But Jibreel confirms that Sayyidina Muhammad was now a prophet, and his prophethood had begun. The Prophet went back home, and with this famous, it was well known as Zamiluni, the Thuruni, cover me. But he received further revelation saying he had to start making da'wah. So now we're moving to the new phase of the prophethood, where the Prophet starts making da'wah, calling people to Islam. Now, we have to understand there are two types of people. The people who have love for the Prophet, and people who or people who will use their mind. So what I mean is, the Prophet made da'wah to people who were close to him. There was love between him and those people. So, for example, see his wife Khadija, radiallahu anha. He starts off with Sayyidah Khadija, and then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, his closest friend, and then Zayd ibn Haritha, who was originally the adopted son of Muhammad, adopted him as a son, and Ali ibn Abi Talib. So these were the closest people to him. So he made da'wah to them first, and these people knew him, and they readily accepted what he said, and they converted to Islam. So with the conversion of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, it was interesting because he was only 10 years old at the time, and Ali was still the first cousin of the Prophet. So his father was Abu Talib, and Abu Talib had become a number of children, but he was too poor to be able to afford to feed them all. So he sent Ali to live with Sayyidina Muhammad, to look after him and feed him, raise him and feed him, all that. Sayyidina Ali was also, for his age, he was 10 years old, but he was very mature. So when he would to convert, the Prophet Muhammad asked him, did you want to consult your father or seek his permission? I said, I don't need his permission to convert. Which is why he was a very mature person for his age. Prophet also made da'wah to his family, his daughters, Zainab, Ruqayya, and Kulthum. They're also mature for their age, but they converted. Of course, Fatima was still too young initially, so 1 or 2 years old, but later on she would convert. And so now the Prophet, as I said, we were beginning the da'wah phase. The da'wah starts off doing it in secret. Why in secret, and why not go public? The Prophet knew that if he went and made da'wah in public at that early stage, it would be very difficult. The society they lived in, as we know, would fight him. And it would confirm Waraq ibn Nawfal's prediction that the people would fight him and try to expel him from Mecca. And for the first 3 years of the prophethood, it was done in secret. And of course, the Prophet wasn't afraid for himself, because he knew that Quraysh would fight him, but he himself wasn't afraid for himself. He knew it was protected, and he was a very brave man, But perhaps for the other Muslims, was a different case. So some of the other people might not be able to defend themselves or as easily as he would. Some of them were women or girls, and maybe some of the other early Muslims might have been too old or too weak to be able to defend themselves, and they would suffer. So at that very early stage, the da'wah was kept secret, done in secret. But the Prophet had certain rules for doing da'wah in secret. Number one, you choose certain people, select the people you make da'wah to. First of all, you choose somebody of good character and morals. So you don't go to someone who's a cheater or a liar and try to convert him to Islam straight away. He's got a bad reputation. So you go for the people with a good reputation, people who are well liked and respected and honored, such as, for example, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And the other thing is that he focused on the youth. His da'wah was primarily for the young youth of Mecca. So Abu Bakr, as I mentioned, is already converted to Islam. Abu Bakr was the Prophet's closest friend, and the thing about Abu Bakr is that his personality was very similar to the Prophet's personality. A lot of the times, the way the Prophet thought, Abu Bakr would think the same way. But Abu Bakr was also widely respected in Mecca, and people knew him. So Abu Bakr, on the first day that he converted, he was able to meet and convince 5 other people to convert. Uthman ibn Affan, Zubair ibn Awam, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Talha ibn Ubaydullah, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. And you can see some of them were young. So Zubair ibn Awam was 15 years old. He was a cousin of the Prophet. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was 17 years old. And Talha ibn Ubaydullah, 16 years old. But of those 5 people that first converted through Sayyidina Abu Bakr, they were all amongst the 10 people that the Prophet promised Jannah to them. The next day, Sayyidina Abu Bakr managed to convert some more people to convert. Abu Ubaydullah ibn Jarrah, Uthman ibn Mad'un, Al-Arqam ibn Abi Al-Arqam, and Abu Salam ibn Abd al-Asad. Of course, Abu Bakr also made da'wah to his own family, his wife and his daughters, his children. He freed a slave, his slave Amir ibn Fuhaira, and he also made da'wah to Bilal ibn Rabah, radiallahu anhu, who converted very early. Of course, Bilal was still a slave at that time. So Abu Bakr was not only successful, he was very enthusiastic, very, eager to make da'wah. He believed in the message, he believed in Sayyidina Muhammad, and he was very successful initially in convincing people to convert. And the reason is that he was a very gentle, simple man. He wasn't harsh or rough, and to be gentle with the one you invite and to avoid violence. So these are important, these are things to keep in mind if you want to make da'wah to people, to convince them about Islam, to convert to Islam. These are very good characters to have, characteristics. And there was actually a hadith of the Prophet where he tells the Muslims, "Innakum nafirin, inna minkum nafirin," something like that. He tells some of the Muslims that some of them are not making da'wah the proper way, and all they are good at is repelling people from Islam. And the way they're doing that da'wah is opposite of the way Abu Bakr did it. Abu Bakr was also a merchant, and he was a well-respected merchant. He had good character, integrity. He was honest, and that's why one of the reasons why people knew him and what sort of a character he was. And also, people loved his company. He had knowledge a lot of knowledge about the history of Quraysh and the genealogies. So people enjoy sitting with him, learning from him. So I mentioned before that there were two sort of, not rules, two characteristics, I guess, the Prophet used when making da'wah and selecting which people to make da'wah to. Number one, those who have good character and noble morals, who had valued truthfulness, trustworthiness, generosity. So these were all qualities in Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet also focused more on the youth. So there's a difference in making da'wah to someone who is young, to someone who is, say, older in life, 40, 50 years old. Someone who's, especially living in Mecca, is living his whole life worshipping idols, and you come and tell him that this is all wrong, you need to worship one true God that you can't see. And that the older person is less likely to convert and follow you. Whereas the youth, their minds are relatively less polluted, more likely to follow and follow you and believe in you. Which is why Prophet, as in that list I had before, yes, Uthman ibn Affan, no, that's Abu Bakr. But this is Abu Bakr was actually implementing these criteria. Zubayr ibn Awam was 15 years old, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas 17 years old, and Talha ibn Ubaydillah 16 years old. And these people would later in life become the biggest supporters of Islam, biggest supporters of the Prophet, and they had huge gains for Islam. And inshallah, I think that's all I have for today. But inshallah, we'll continue with next time with more about the early period of the da'wah. And as I said, it was done in secret and for a reason. But after the first 3 years, it would become public. Inshallah, be next time. Does anybody have any questions or any comments that I want to mention or say or anything? No, that's it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله